Nice to meet you. I'm biased. I've been playing Mario and Luigi games ever since I was an attractive little boy. I sure hope saying that about myself doesn't count as creepy. But I gotta be honest up front, it's hard as hell to try and be objective about Mario and Luigi Brothership, especially considering the miracle that it even exists in the first place. I've played every single game in the franchise, but the studio that made the first 5 games is noticeably more bankrupt than they used to be. I mean, it's not like they own the license to 2 of the most iconic video game characters of all time though, which leads us back to the present. After Super Mario RPG flew too close to the sun, melting the wax wings of Square Enix in the process and landing in a pit of copyright quandaries, Nintendo had to branch out if they wanted their star plumber to take on more turn-based adventures. On the more popular side, this led to the Paper Mario franchise, predominantly on home consoles and not the topic of today's video, so go home. On my more popular side, handheld consoles would be home to the new Mario and Luigi franchise. Side note, this is easy for people in the know, but I have to imagine having 2 franchises called Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi is really confusing to the normal people of the world. Superstar Saga, Partners in Time, and fan favorite Bowser's Inside Story are not only really popular entries in the franchise, no, they're also the only good entries in the franchise. 3DS titles Dream Team and Paper Jam didn't do as well, which led to some remakes while Alpha Dream tried to recapture the magic, and bankruptcy when they ultimately failed. Luckily for me, somebody else made this one. But as I mentioned before, I've been waiting for this game to come out since Paper Jam, Dream Team, Bowser's Inside Story, and I'm supposed to pretend I'm not in love with it? Yes, I am. And I'm going to succeed. Honestly, I think it's safe to say this isn't the best Mario and Luigi game ever made. For one thing, it easily has the longest runtime of any game in the franchise by a lot. And the longer runtime also leads to a bit of pacing issues, especially with the tutorial, which is a good time to explain what the hell we're even doing here. Mario and Luigi is a turn-based RPG like any other, but especially like Paper Mario. You have a small selection of attacks and special abilities to perform each turn, but in order to make sure they truly hit home, you also have the magic of timed button presses, which is just a fancy way of saying QTE. They're pretty fun. I don't know why, especially given how many times you do them, but they really add a level of depth to a relatively simple game. For a little bit more depth, anytime Mario's performing an action, you press A, and anytime Luigi performs an action, you press B. This is pretty unimportant when it comes to basic attacks, since you do them often enough to have every button press and timing memorized. But when it comes to dodging, you often have to figure out on the fly which button is going to save you from that incoming damage. For any of you who know the other games, this one is pretty much exactly what you'd expect from a Switch version of the game. It takes a little bit longer to unlock some of the systems and goes into a little bit more depth. So let's talk about the things I really didn't like. There are a lot of load screens. It's not a huge deal and definitely nothing new to the franchise, but every time you enter combat there's a 5 to 10 second loading screen, and this is 2024, I just want it to be a bit snappier. Also, the humor has definitely shifted. I still found a lot of moments funny, but some of the jokes almost feel more subtle or aren't presented as jokes. This is actually a good thing for me personally, but the story definitely targets children, and I'm not entirely sure most of the jokes would be all that funny to children. The story in these games is never all that great, but that's okay because neither is this one. It still might be the greatest one yet. The characters feel a bit more fleshed out, there are a lot of side stories going on, and for once we don't have to find the 7 MacGuffins to stop the bad guy from fusing with Bowser. Now there are only 5. But there actually is a story from moment to moment. Rather than always hunting down the next target, the point of our quest is to rebuild a broken world. And there's no point in rebuilding something and ignoring the plight of every citizen, so a lot of the game involves solving related problems instead of beelining the goal, which might be where the runtime comes in. This game is long, and as much as I like that, it definitely takes away from the possible replays in the future. But it also means that they tend to mix things up from time to time. The game takes place on a series of islands, and a lot of them have their own self-contained goal that tries to change up the gameplay a little, sometimes even a lot, but never too much, until you get to the Murder Mystery Island. Also, having more buttons and fancier tech is clear at a glance. The vast amounts of equipment and the new battle plug system really allow you to cater to your own playstyle, even if most people are just going to pick everything that does big damage. The battle plug system is honestly a huge step up from any version of badges that they replace from previous games. You have a few slots and unlock more throughout the game, but you can equip buffs in them that do anything from shake down enemies for extra coins to preventing death. Each one has a set number of uses before it needs to recharge, which forces you to experiment, and some of them even combo together for extra powerful effects. The other massive improvement is that all of your overworld movement options are assigned to the right stick. It's way faster to access than some of the previous titles, but it would have been cool to see those overworld moves show up in combat like in Superstar Saga. Maybe next time. But speaking of the overworld, it may actually be the least impressive part of the game. Enemy variety is nice, with plenty of new and returning enemies to fight, but the worlds they inhabit are mostly bland. Everything is standard video game same fare. Jungle, desert, lava, ice. You get exceptions, but sometimes it's just 3 or 4 islands in a row of the same theme, and it starts to get old fast. Which is a real shame, because I actually like the map and the travel system. It's nothing complicated, but you can set your ship on a path and go adventuring while it finds new islands, or if you're impatient like me, just speed it along as fast as possible. It certainly isn't the best game, and maybe not even the best game in the franchise, but in its defense, were you expecting something to topple Bowser's Inside Story? But while it isn't overly exceptional, I think it does a great job of understanding its audience. It's lighthearted, the story isn't constantly bothering you, and there are loads of challenges and side quests, and beautiful numbers to min-max all over the place. The only problem is that Nintendo thinks its audience is children when we're actually all 30-year-old nerds.
Please subscribe, I'm just a disembodied voice. It would really help my confidence.